Just a reminder, these are all my opinions and are of course subject to change. This is all subjective after all. Discussion is always welcome. Just don't be a butthead. You know, when I sat down and planned out what movies I was going to talk about over the next few weeks, I knew that I would have to talk about these movies. Buddy cop films are all the rage, with Rush Hour 4 allegedly in the works, and Lethal Weapon 5, even though Richard Donner passed away in 2021 from being 100 years old. We are never escaping this cycle of remakes, reboots, sequels, legacy sequels, prequels, and all the madness in between. So why not milk it even more? Because this weekend, the 4th installment of the popular Will Smith and Martin Lawrence franchise comes out, which means today we are going all the way back to 1995 and 2003 to see where this humble series started. I, of course, am talking about the two most wisecracking, rule-breaking, cool dudes around, known as Bad Boys. Okay, truth be told, I actually like this movie a little. I think this is peak Will Smith and Martin Lawrence when it comes to the banter between their characters. The first Bad Boys has more jokes and one-liners than I think it does action, honestly. Some of the jokes land really well, and others are like those minion Facebook posts your great aunt would post every single day after Despicable Me came out. Does anyone else remember that 9th circle of hell that we had to go through? I also think the action in this one is a little dated at parts, but it just adds to its charm mostly. The Bad Boy movies center around two Miami PD detectives, Mike Lowry, played by Will Smith, and Marcus Burnett, played by Martin Lawrence. They're speeding down the highway in Mike's super expensive sports car, because immediately this movie tells us what kind of characters these two are. Mike is a trust fund kid who is super rich, but he also always wanted to be a cop, so he gets to play it smooth while busting the bad guys. Marcus, on the other hand, is a married man who wants to constantly remind everyone that he is not getting laid.
Please, man, I'm not getting my sex at home. Don't deny me this. I'm married. That's what married means. It means you sleep together, but you can't get none.
Marcus also is a messy guy and a little bit of a doofus, but he and Mike are best buds, and that's all that counts. The movie opens with Mike and Marcus speeding down the highway in Mike's super expensive sports car. They end up pulling over because Marcus is a messy eater and Mike is super particular about his car, and two men attempt to rob them at gunpoint. Of course, they are no match for Mike and Marcus, which allows the movie to show that these two bad boys are in fact the baddest of boys. The main setup for this movie and overall plot is pretty simple. Turns out the police department was robbed overnight and all the drugs from Mike and Marcus's big case were stolen. And now it's up to them to figure out what happened and track down the bad guys. When we learn about the drugs being stolen, this is where we get to meet the absolute best character from all these movies, the police captain. Every time this guy is on screen, I am instantly in a good mood. His whole deal is that he is always stressed out and always very angry. So no matter what's taking place in the scene, he's always at 100, and it's just so funny.
I haven't killed anybody yet today, Captain.
Hey, do you want me to yell at you? Because I can do that.
Let me tell you something.
He yells at them that they have 72 hours to solve the case, or else Internal Affairs is going to shut them all down. Which, like, is that how our police system works? Internal Affairs can just shut down the entire Miami Police Department just because it thinks this could have been an inside job? That's some insane power, but go off, Queen. So during their investigation, Mike asks his friend Max if she knows anything about the robbery, and if she could also maybe help them out with getting a lead. This sends Max and her friend Julie to a party for some rich asshole partying like it's 1995, which it was in fact 1995, so there you go. Our big baddie of the movie, Fauché, is introduced when he shows up to kill everyone and be evil. Lucky for Julie, but not so lucky for Max, she manages to escape and becomes the only witness to the crimes. Julie calls the police department and the captain makes Marcus pretend to be Mike so they don't lose their chance at a witness.
It's Mike Lowry.
He doesn't talk that way. Talk like him, like him. Try to talk sexy.
Come on.
You don't sound sexy enough.
I will say, when watching this movie, I did not expect a switching places situation to be in this, but it was a really nice touch. Because now, Julie thinks Marcus is Mike, which means Mike has to pretend to be Marcus in front of Julie to not blow their stories. Now, a reoccurring joke, if you want to call it that, is that Marcus isn't getting any quality time at home, wink wink, nod nod, cough cough. So because Marcus is an idiot, he decides to lie to his wife to avoid explaining to her that he's working a case protecting a witness. No, instead he tells her he's going to Ohio to work some other case, and because he's worried about her, he is letting Mike stay in their house while he's gone. After having Julie look at some mugshots, she's able to get Mike and Marcus a lead to a nightclub. They tell her to stay put, but she decides to go to the nightclub anyways, and a fish tank and bathroom fight take place. This leads to a car chase with explosive barrels in order to make it a little more thrilling. Unfortunately for our bad boys, a news chopper spotted their chase, and Marcus's wife finds out about their little lie. She barges in on the trio in Mike's apartment in order to confront them, but at the same time, the bad guys have tracked their location and show up to start shooting the place up. In the midst of the chaos, Julie is taken by the villain, and they escape before Mike and Marcus can stop them. That is not before Will Smith gets his shirtless action hero moment by running after the car on foot while letting his abs flow in the wind. Meanwhile, Internal Affairs shuts down the entire department and halts the entire investigation, even though Mike's apartment was just shot up by the bad guys. They still think it's an inside job, and somehow Mike and Marcus are involved. Luckily, Mike and Marcus were able to declassify a file that will help lead them to Julie. As it turns out, there was a mole in the department, and that's how they end up learning the location of the bad guy and his whole whereabouts. I guess that means Internal Affairs was right all along. Would you look at that? Luckily, the captain, being the awesome dude that he is, tells the bad boys to go get Julie back and stop the bad guys, and he'll help them however he can. Now, there are two characters I haven't mentioned yet, because up until this point in the movie, they really only show up to make some very questionable jokes to Mike and Marcus, and then they just leave. But now they get to participate in the action as the four of them are able to track the villain to his private hangar at the airport. An explosive final battle takes place when the good guys ram a garbage truck into the hangar and then shoot a bunch of explosive barrels. This makes the final showdown a bunch of guys running around on fire or spraying their rifles in every direction. The big baddie Fauché ends up escaping in a car so our trio can race after him in an epic high-speed chase. Marcus is able to outmaneuver the bad guy, and it causes him to crash into a wall. Which I will say, switching up the final car chase so Marcus is the one driving is a nice touch, especially after the movie spent a lot of time showing us that Mike was the car guy. But just as the bad guy is about to pull out a hidden gun and shoot Mike, Mike turns around and shoots him like 6 times instead. Which leads to my point that these movies always end the same way. We get a final shot as the camera pulls away as our bad boys exchange more banter before the credits start rolling. I gotta say, overall, I think this movie is pretty fun. I think this movie does a great job of not only showing us the friendship between Mike and Marcus, but also how sometimes they both do things that pushes the other to their limit. Now, this of course brings us 8 years into the future with the sequel, Bad Boys 2. Bad Boys 2 isn't fucking around with how much it turned up the dial in every single way. You want even more action and over-the-top insanity? Here's Will Smith doing a weird barrel roll on the ground shooting 2 guns. You like the small amount of drugs that was in the last one? Here's a whole nightclub going batshit crazy on drugs. Do you want to see the KKK get shot a bunch because they're in this movie? You're in luck. It's not super surprising given that Michael Bay just got off an insane 3-movie run with The Rock, Armageddon, and Pearl Harbor, and on top of that, he was gearing up to do the Transformers movies, a series I may one day have to cover. The movie opens with a bunch of drugs being made in a lab overseas, and they're shipping them into Florida on cargo ships. At the same time, the Miami PD's Super Special Awesome Task Force, TNT, which stands for the Tactical Narcotics Team. Yep, this is definitely a Michael Bay movie. The TNT task force is gearing up for a big raid, but they also have two guys undercover who are going to give them the signal when to start the takedown. And would you believe it that not only is this a meeting for the KKK, but the two undercover cops are none other than Mike and Marcus. Our bad boys have appeared, and they are here to make jokes and shoot people as much as possible. That's pretty much what happens as a big shootout goes down, and turns out there was barely any drugs, which makes the whole department look bad. So after the opening shootout, the movie sets up the real tension and plot of this second outing. Marcus is questioning whether or not he wants to remain partners with Mike because Mike is a little reckless. And he also kind of shot Marcus in the booty during that opening shootout. At the same time, Marcus's little sister Sid is in town, and she's working a case for the DEA, which just so happens to be the case that Mike and Marcus are working. Meanwhile, Mike is secretly dating Sid and hasn't told Marcus yet because he doesn't want to make him upset. This leads to Mike and Marcus following a lead and interrupting a drop going down that Sid set up through the DEA. And to make sure you know this is still a Michael Bay movie, the next portion is nothing but absolute vehicle destruction. I don't know what it is about Michael Bay and destroying vehicles, but this man really loves to make them explode. Because of their antics, they have to go see the captain, who is back and better than ever. He gets to yell at them some more, and honestly, the best jokes in this movie are the ones between the captain, Mike, and Marcus. So our dynamic duo follows their lead to a house run by a guy named the Haitian. This results in a pretty well shot and fun gunfight. I really like the moment where the guy goes to look through the hole just as Mike is pulling the trigger to his gun. Good stuff. Through interrogating the Haitian, they learn about the big baddie Tapia, the man behind all the drugs. Now, this guy Tapia is untouchable because every time the department goes after him, he just sues them, and that makes it all go away apparently. So Mike and Marcus go to his house undercover as exterminators to find out what they can about Tapia and his whole operation. Luckily, they get enough information that leads them to Floyd, a KKK member from the start of the movie. Floyd is played by Michael Shannon, who is just a great treat in this movie, as he spends most of it getting stuffed into a trunk and then rattled around. Through their new friend Floyd, the bad boys plus Sid go out to a dock in the middle of the ocean to wait for one of the drug drops to go down. For some reason, while waiting for a very important part of this extremely big case, Sid decides to tell Marcus about her and Mike. Of course, this doesn't go down well, and the duo starts to split even more. Luckily, they're able to track the boat from the drop they just witnessed back to the shore. And there they notice caskets being loaded into a mortuary van for transport. This is where we get a double cameo. The first is in the form of Dan Marino, who is a Miami local legend for the Miami Dolphins football team, and then the second and much better cameo with Mr. Michael Bay himself. Another car chase takes place, and in the end, the bad boys cause more damage to public property and still manage to come up empty-handed, making the captain even more angry. Marcus tells Mike that after this case, they are done as partners, and he already submitted his transfer paperwork. Yet somehow, through all their incompetence, Mike is able to get a warrant to go check out this mortuary as a last-ditch effort to nail Tapia. More antics take place, and they're able to get the evidence they need from the mortuary, but for some reason, Marcus decides to try the drugs. This leads to a very comical scene of Marcus at the captain's house just being the worst kind of person on drugs. But what they got from the mortuary is enough to let the captain put together a raid to try to stop Tapia once and for all. The massive raid goes down, but during all the chaos, he's able to escape and take Sid with him as a hostage. I haven't really talked about it, but there's this whole side plot with Sid about how she's going undercover in Tapia's operation for the DEA. It goes nowhere and only exists so she can be present during the raid and look guilty so Tapia has a hostage to take with him. He takes her all the way back to his mansion in Cuba, and the bad boys, along with some help from some rogue justice-seeking extras, go to Cuba to stop Tapia once and for all. Originally, I was never a fan of the Bad Boys 2 ending. It always felt like it went just a little too long and really has two different endings. The first being after the raids, where it feels like the movie should have stopped, and then it moves into the next ending, which is the showdown in Cuba. The final fight is a very long sequence that starts with an attack on his compound, has guard posts exploding, firefights in a blown apart mansion, and then it just turns into a Hummer commercial as it crawls through the rubble. After that, we get a car chase down the side of a mountain that ends with them trying to get on US soil in the form of Guantanamo Bay. By the end though, the bad boys are able to beat Tapia, stop his operation, and save Sid. So the movie ends with Sid and Mike getting together and Marcus changing his mind and remaining Mike's partner. There's definitely a lot more stupidity in Bad Boys 2, and once again, it feels just a little too long. One thing this franchise definitely loves is its hero shot. It makes it very noticeable that this is a thing this movie loves to do, and it wants to make sure you know it. I did enjoy how this movie makes an effort to give us more character development with both Mike and Marcus. Marcus still complains about his sex life, but I'm starting to really think something is just wrong with his penis. Mike is still a rich kid playing cop, but we get to see that there's a little bit more emotion and actual character beneath that rough exterior. It's nice they tried to keep some recurring characters in this one, like the other detectives they banter with, and Marcus's wife. The sequel definitely leans more into the early 2000s action movie aesthetic, whereas the first one is surprisingly the most grounded out of them all. One of my favorite scenes is when Mike and Marcus try to scare a 15-year-old boy who wants to take Marcus's daughter out on a date. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence gave 110% for this scene, and I love it. There's a lot of things I have to say about the Bad Boy movies, but we still have 2 more we need to watch. In the meantime though, I have to say that Bad Boys and Bad Boys 2 are both just stupid and fun enough for me to put them in so bad it's good. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this, don't forget to check out my video on the movie The Covenant, a 2006 forgotten gem. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below what movie you'd like to see me cover in the future.